Coming up on this Thursday edition of Newsline at noon, Ukraine announces a plan to withdraw its troops from Crimea, effectively handing the disputed peninsula to Russia. President Park Geun-hye will preside over a televised discussion with policymakers and businessmen this afternoon to draw up a plan to drastically streamline regulations. Plus, the US Federal Reserve continues to cut its bond buying program and lays ground for a rate hike that could come as early as spring next year. These stories and more on Newsline at noon.
Thanks for joining us. You're watching Newsline at noon. I'm Ojin-jo in Seoul.
Very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom. Our top story this lunchtime, the Ukrainian government is making preparations to evacuate its troops from Crimea after more Ukrainian bases were taken over by Russian forces on Wednesday.
Western leaders say they will slap even more sanctions on Moscow if Russian forces encroach further into eastern Ukraine. Shin Se-min starts us off.
The head of Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council told reporters in Kiev Wednesday that Ukraine was planning to relocate 25,000 service personnel and families from the region, effectively surrendering the disputed territory. His comments came after pro-Russian forces stormed two naval bases in Crimea on Wednesday night and raised a Russian flag. These were just the latest in a series of takeovers by Russian troops and local self-defense forces using a mixture of attrition and threats. The attacks on the bases in Crimea came as the United States and Europe sought ways to increase pressure on defiant Russia. Speaking from the former Soviet Republic of Lithuania Wednesday, U.S. Vice President Joe Biden declared that the U.S. was absolutely committed to defending its allies.
I want to make it clear. We stand resolutely with our Baltic allies in support of the Ukrainian people and against Russian aggression. As long as Russia continues on this dark path, they will face increasing political and economic isolation.
The Obama administration and its allies said Wednesday that they're working to devise new and tougher economic penalties to stop Russian President Vladimir Putin from moving forces further into Ukraine's eastern territory. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon will also meet Putin in Moscow on Thursday to seek a way out of the conflict. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
There's rising speculation the leaders of Korea, the United States, and Japan will meet on the sidelines of the Nuclear Security Summit in The Hague next week. If the trilateral summit does take place, it will be the first time President Park Geun-hye will meet with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe since taking office. Our Hwang Sung-hee reports.
It's looking increasingly likely that President Park Geun-hye will meet with their Japanese counterparts in what will be the first official meeting between the two since she took office last year. The meeting would take place as part of a trilateral summit with the United States on the sidelines of next week's Nuclear Security Summit in The Hague. President Park has thus far refused to sit down with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, criticizing him for his distorted perception of history. But Abe's recent stream of conciliatory gestures has put the ball in President Park's court. Last week, the Japanese leader stated his administration will uphold a landmark apology issued to the victims of Japan's wartime sexual enslavement. Just days later, Abe called South Korea Japan's most important neighboring country and expressed his hope that the two could build a future-oriented relationship at the upcoming meeting in the Netherlands. The Japanese government has also reportedly postponed announcing the results of its annual textbook screening to early April from March 26th. The event usually angers South Korea, which argues Japan is trying to cover up its wartime crimes and making unjustified territorial claims over the Korea-controlled Dokdo Island. Sources in Seoul say that Tokyo's actions may not be enough for a bilateral summit, but that the two could meet in the presence of the U.S. The presidential office of Cheongwade is reportedly reviewing whether to say yes to the trilateral summit next week. If the talks do take place, the three leaders will likely discuss North Korea's nuclear program and regional issues of mutual interest. As willing as the two neighbors may be to patch up their differences, they're also under pressure from Washington, who wants its two main allies in Northeast Asia to mend ties before President Barack Obama visits the region next month. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
China has shed some light on the country's top nuclear envoy's visit to Pyongyang. Beijing's foreign ministry spokesperson told reporters on Wednesday that Woo Da-wei arrived in North Korea on Monday for discussions on the state affairs on the Korean peninsula and the resumption of the six-party talks that have been stalled since late 2008. His trip follows one by China's Vice Foreign Minister Liu Zhanmin last week. The back-to-back visits are aimed at bringing Pyongyang back to the table for denuclearization dialogue that involves the two Koreas, the U.S., China, Japan, and Russia.
North Korea will hold the first session of its new legislature next month, the first since North Korean leader Kim Jong-un assumed power in 2011. The North state-run Korean Central News Agency reported Thursday that the inaugural session of the 13th Supreme People's Assembly is slated for April 9th in Pyongyang. They are expected to discuss matters related to helping Kim consolidate his power base after the recent purge of close aides, including Jang Song-taek, once the second most powerful man in the reclusive regime. Earlier this month, 687 new deputies were elected to the North's rubber-stamp parliament, including leader Kim Jong-un, who was elected unanimously. The government has reiterated its stance against civic groups seeking to provide aid to North Korea to help resolve its food crisis. Unification Minister Ryu Kil-jae told reporters on Wednesday that it's not the right time to provide cross-border assistance when relations between the Koreas have neither deteriorated nor improved. Ryu's remarks come after the Korean Council for Reconciliation and Cooperation launched a public campaign last week to raise money for sending 1 million sacks of fertilizer to the north. The ministry had previously said the aid plan violates a ban on cross-border trade and exchanges that took effect in May 2010, following North Korea's torpedoing of a South Korean Navy vessel that killed 46 sailors.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea, connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on NEWSLINE at Noon with Mark Broom and Jin-ju.
I'm Jin-ju with Pro.
Market researcher, strategy analytics, said Thursday that LG Electronics brought in about...
President Park Geun-hye has not minced words about deregulation in recent days, going as far as to describe red tape as a lump of cancer. She will find out if everyone is on board with her idea later on this Thursday when she meets with business leaders and government officials for a 4-hour-long discussion on this issue. Sung Ji-sun has the details.
The ministerial-level meeting concerning deregulation that President Park Geun-hye vowed to preside over has turned into a much broader discussion between the government and private sector. At 2 p.m. on Thursday, over 140 government officials and businessmen will sit down to discuss the government's push toward deregulation. Attendees will range from representatives of major economic organizations and large conglomerates to small and medium-sized companies who are expected to express their opinions on the reform proposals. President Park has stressed that deregulation, particularly in the service sector, is a key part of our creative economy vision. She has called repeatedly for lifting and relaxing regulations in a bold manner to help business build on creative ideas, saying deregulation is the fastest and easiest way to spur economic growth for the people. In a speech marking her first year in office last month, President Park reiterated her dedication toward reform.
이 모든 규제 개혁의 과정 하나하나를 제가 규제 장관 회의를 통해 직접 챙겨 나갈 것입니다.
Thursday's 4-hour discussion will be televised nationwide,
completely unfiltered.
The discussion will proceed with enough time to discuss all subjects on the table, and the whole process will be open to the media.
After hearing from 20 representatives from the private sector in the first session, experts will present case studies and discuss ways to carry out regulatory reform. 송지선, Arirang News.
Now, in line with her plan to boost the economy, another ambitious project President Park pushed for as she took office was to provide government support to financially troubled households. Now, a year has passed since the government launched a program dubbed the National Happiness Fund, and officials say around 250,000 people, that is more than 86% of those who applied for this program, have benefited from it so far. The fund works by rewriting and downsizing debts of heavily indebted individuals. The Park administration aims at helping some 326,000 people over the span of 5 years. According to the Financial Services Commission Thursday, the government is already more than 3/4 of the way to reaching its goal. Officials add the fund will also be expanded to help tens of thousands of college students.
A growing number of Korean manufacturers believe the domestic economy is well on the road to recovery. The Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry says the Business Survey Index hit a 3-year high in the second quarter, jumping 19 points from the previous quarter to 111. A reading above 100 means that optimists outnumber pessimists. The survey was conducted with around 2,400 manufacturing firms. The Chamber says manufacturers expect economic conditions to improve on the back of an economic recovery in the US and the Korean government's efforts to deregulate as part of its 3-year economic innovation plan. Now, Korea's National Health Insurance Service, which is responsible for promoting public health, says it could be seeking up to $309 million in damages from cigarette companies next month. The agency says it wants to raise awareness about the dangers of smoking, emphasizing that smokers are more likely to suffer from a range of serious diseases, including cancer. The NAHIS says it costs around $1.6 billion a year to treat smoking-related illnesses, and that money comes out of taxpayers' pockets. Smokers currently pay around $2.30 for a packet of cigarettes in Korea, of which just 33 cents goes to the health service. But the agency says cigarette companies do not pay anything into the NHIS fund. Now, motorists looking for a more cost-efficient and eco-friendly options are driving a renewed interest in electric vehicles. And here in Korea, the nation's resort island of Jeju has become the testbed for EVs. Our Na Hyung-kyung reports on plans to make Jeju a carbon-free island.
Korea had about 2,000 electric vehicle charging stations as of the end of last year, and a quarter of those are on Jeju Island, which only covers about 2% of Korea's territory. Jeju officials have been pushing to transform the island into a carbon-free zone, saying there is only about 200 kilometers of road around the coast, and the island is not as hilly as the mainland.
It helps a lot that Jeju is an island. This initiative is part of a smart grid project started 7 years ago. Currently, there are 497 charging facilities on Jeju Island, making it one of the world's best places with an EV charging infrastructure.
So far, Jeju Island has about 360 electric vehicles running, and by the year 2030, it plans to up that number to 370,000. And people are definitely becoming more aware of the merits of owning one of these vehicles. The government's move to provide subsidies for new EV owners has also helped make them more popular. Including tax breaks, the subsidies can mount to as much as $22,000 or potentially half the purchase price.
I've been waiting for the past 6 months because I heard about the government subsidies.
I didn't think it was going to be nice, but it's a lot better than I expected. It's comfortable and quiet.
Jeju Island began offering EV rental car services at the start of the year as well. There are about 30 electric cars ready to be rented out, with 10 per week rented on average as of now. Officials plan to make another 30 cars available for rental by the end of the year. Na Hyun-kyung, Arirang News, Jeju.
Putting K-pop aside for a minute, let's now get a taste of some Korean traditional music. The National Kugak Center will start off its new season with a traditional performance of royal court music this Thursday. The ritual music is not only Korea's #1 cultural property, but it is also registered as a UNESCO masterpiece. Our Park Ji-won reports.
This solemn and graceful music is part of the Jongmyo Jaereak, royal ritual music that has been performed in Korea for more than 600 years. The music was composed in the 15th century by King Sejong the Great, the fourth king of the Joseon dynasty, to honor his royal ancestors and pray for the peace and stability of the country. The music is performed during royal ancestral rites that were once held at least 5 times a year in front of Jongmyo. The structure is an ancient shrine housing the remains of the kings and queens of the Joseon dynasty, the last dynasty of Korea that existed from the 14th to the late 19th century. This collection of instrumental music, song, and dance is Korea's important intangible cultural property #1 and was designated by UNESCO as a masterpiece of the oral and intangible heritage of humanity in 2001.
This ritual music is simple rather than showing off rich melodies, as it greets the spirits of our ancestors during ancestral rites. The solemn music calms and soothes the souls of listeners as well.
The royal ancestral rite is now held just once a year at Jongmyo Shrine on the first Sunday in May, and it is very rare for the royal ritual music to be presented on a stage. But for the first time in 5 years, the National Kugak Center will bring the music to the stage in a 70-minute performance held over 2 nights on Thursday and Friday. Starting this week, the National Kugak Center will present a series featuring traditional Korean music and dance, including concerts of royal court music and pansori, a style of narrative singing. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
And in other news, the president of Hotel Shilla, Lee Boo-jin, has reportedly exonerated a destitute man after he crashed his taxi into the front door of the hotel. The accident happened late last month when the taxi careened toward the hotel, destroying a revolving door and its frame. The 82-year-old driver, surnamed Hwang, claimed the accident occurred because of a sudden, unattended acceleration, but police concluded Hwang's negligence was the cause. Hwang would have had to pay more than $420,000 for the damage, since the taxi drivers union, of which Hwang is a member, could only cover 1/10 of the cost. Lee, who is the eldest daughter of Samsung Electronics chief Lee Geun-hye, will also pay for the hospital fees of those injured in the incident.
Now, new U.S. Federal Reserve Chief Janet Yellen has kept the policy set by her predecessor Ben Bernanke on track by slashing another $10 billion from the Fed's monthly bond buying program. She also hinted at a rate increase which could come as soon as spring next year. Hwang Sung-hee has the details.
U.S. Federal Reserve officials have made another $10 billion reduction in their bond buying stimulus program, as widely expected. After her first monetary policy meeting as Fed Chair, Janet Yellen said Wednesday that the economy is strong enough to support continued improvement in the labor market. The program was at $85 billion a month in December, and the fresh cut will take it to $55 billion. While Yellen said that the central bank expects to keep interest rates near zero for a considerable time after the bond buying program ends this fall, she hinted that it could start raising rates next spring.
The language that we use in this statement is considerable period. This is the kind of term it's hard to define, but, probably means something on the order of around 6 months or that type of thing.
The Fed tried, however, to set the market at ease, saying it would look at a wide range of economic indicators to make a judgment on the economy's readiness for higher rates. It also said that it would no longer link its future decision to increase rates to the unemployment rate, as the jobless rate has fallen faster than expected. Despite the assurance, financial markets reacted swiftly to her comments.
In fact, one of the negative aspects of today's Fed meeting was that the Fed increased the timing or the amount of rate hikes that we're going to see and push them forward.
Market analysts say that Yellen failed to maintain the experienced ambiguity of her predecessor Ben Bernanke and gave too much information for the market to bear. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
Okay, now for a look at some of the other international headlines we're following at this hour, we are going to turn it over to our Eunice Kim, who's standing by at the News Center.
Good afternoon, Eunice. Do you have anything to report on the search for the missing Malaysia Airlines plane?
Hi guys, yeah, still no major leads. What we are hearing though is that the FBI is helping Malaysian police analyze the flight simulator taken from the home of the captain of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. Malaysia's police chief said a data log on the simulator had been deleted about a month before the Boeing 777 went missing. Malaysian authorities are also saying they are analyzing some radar data from other countries without specifying. Meanwhile, on Wednesday, Malaysia's acting transport minister said that background checks on all but 3 of the 239 people on board have produced no significant information. They're still waiting on background checks from Russia and Ukraine. And turning to some other news now, in the United States, Toyota will pay $1.2 billion following a 4-year investigation by U.S. regulators on the Japanese auto giant. The settlement is the largest criminal penalty to date imposed on an automaker in the United States. Toyota had recalled more than 10 million cars, including its popular Camry model, due to problems with their brakes, accelerator pedals, and floor mats. U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder said Toyota had misled the public, federal regulators, and members of Congress to conceal safety issues of which they were well aware. And thousands of demonstrators, mostly university students, stormed Taiwan's parliament Wednesday to protest its trade deal with China. They say the agreement would hurt Taiwan's economy and leave the country vulnerable to pressure from Beijing. China is Taiwan's biggest trading partner, and the trade pact is meant to open up each other's services market in as many as 80 industries, including banking and e-commerce. Taiwan's central news agency called the occupation by demonstrators unprecedented. Crowds gathered outside the complex as well. And fugitive former NSA contractor Edward Snowden made a surprise appearance at a TED conference in Vancouver, not in person but via a web link-up. The session was moderated by web inventor Sir Tim Berners-Lee. Now, Snowden told his audience some of the most important reporting to be done is yet to come, while making a case that the U.S. National Security Agency had violated their own rules thousands of times in a year. He called on technology firms to do more in protecting privacy, suggesting internet companies encrypt every page users visit.
While some parts of the nation is still covered with lots of clouds and the sporadic showers are expected to continue around the country throughout the day, and we can expect to receive somewhere between 5 to 10 millimeters of rain and maybe more in parts of Gangwon-do, in some parts of Gangwon-do. But it seems like rain will turn to snow in those regions. Heavy snow advisory was issued for parts of Gangwon-do this morning, and up to 20 centimeters of snow is expected in the mountainous regions in Gangwon-do, so please be aware of that if you're in those areas. So as we can see, today is going to be windy, wet, and chilly day. The highs will be 2 to 3 degrees lower than yesterday, and tomorrow we'll wake up to a chillier morning than today, and daytime highs should be similar to a tad lower than today. But it's going to be a sunny Friday, and we have a weekend warm-up on the way under lots of sunshine. So Do keep that in mind, and here are the readings for today. The afternoon highs in the capital and Gwangju will rise to 11, while Daegu and Busan should top out at 15 and 16 respectively. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like down on Jeju will climb up to 11. Daejeon will reach 12, while Mount Kumgang should see a high of -1 this afternoon. Well, that's all I have for you today, and hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.
And that's about it. Those are the stories we're following at this hour.
Mark and I will be back at the same time tomorrow. Thank you for watching.